All right. Good morning, everybody. Well, good afternoon at this point. And thank you, Glenn, for inviting me to come share my experience, strength, and hope. And by God's grace and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, one day at a time in strong sponsorship. I've been sober since January 3rd, 1994, for which I'm very, very grateful. And it certainly is God's grace, certainly not by my own merit. I got here, I was basically dying the way I was living and living the way I was dying. And I had no idea what my problem was. And it would be, a little bit of time before I came to know. And I think we come to know these things. As I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, as many of us get here by whatever avenue brings us here. And I believe that's really God's grace and God's mercy that gets us here, and continued participation in my program, in our program, one day at a time is what keeps me here. I have a sponsor whose name is Deborah W. Her sponsor is Polly P. Polly's sponsor is Rena K, and Rena has a sponsor as well. So I'm talking about 4 generations above me. And then there's me in the middle of the bed of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm so grateful that I continue to do what was suggested for me to do when I got here, which is don't drink, get in the middle of the room of Alcoholics Anonymous, sit down, come all the way in, sit all the way down, and shut the heck up. And that was perfectly fine with me because I didn't have a lot to say, because I didn't even really know what the heck I was doing when I got here. But I can tell you one thing I've learned over the years is that I can't do this thing without y'all. Y'all can do this thing without me, but I can't do it without you. And that's been my experience, strength and hope, is to keep coming back and to continue to keep suiting up and showing up and doing the next right indicated thing, whatever that is, whatever I was told to do when I first got here. And I'll tell you about my first day of walking into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I'll tell you the story of how I did that and what's happened as a result of doing that continued one day at a time all these years. And I stepped across the threshold of Alcoholics Anonymous, and not 1 minute before, not 1 day before, not 24 hours before I stepped across the threshold of Alcoholics Anonymous did I know that the obsession and the compulsion to drink was going to be removed. Now, I know that doesn't happen for everybody, but I think God saw fit to give me a little edge on this thing because I couldn't stop. And I had tried so many times to quit drinking and couldn't stop. And then when I did stop, I couldn't stay quit. And I'd always go back to it. I didn't have a plan of action. And that's what you guys have taught me in here, is how to suit up, show up, and not drink today and be happy about it. That's what I saw sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, was people that I knew, people like me, people like you, sitting in the rooms, not drinking and actually being happy about it. And I didn't know how you do that. I didn't have the tools to do that. I didn't have any idea what alcoholism was until I got here. And you began to explain to me what was wrong with me and what happened and what it was like for you. And so the evidence of this program for me early on was watching what you did in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I began to see the evidence of God working through you, which touched my heart, which had never, ever happened before. You see, I'm all up in here, and that didn't help me a whole lot. That qualified me for a seat in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, was my thinking and my drinking. And how do you not drink today and be happy about it? And that was a process. And I was told when I got here, welcome, Vivian, come on in and have a seat with us, and come all the way in, sit all the way down. These were things I heard early on. They mean so much more to me now than they ever did then. I didn't understand a whole lot. I got here so broken at depth, as we all do. You know, I heard it early on, the chains of alcoholism were too soft to be felt until they were too strong to be broken. That's what qualifies me for a seat in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I walked through that door and I had no idea why I was there or what I was doing, but you welcomed me with open arms. You said, come on in and sit down. And they said, all you have to do is come to meetings and don't drink. Now, I hear today that that is not the solution, that the fellowship is not the solution, that the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous has good orderly directions in there, precise directions on what to do and how to get sober and stay sober and be happy about it. But I got to come to meetings to be reminded to get back into the book. So I came to, and I came to believe, because what you were doing and what you were saying and how you were acting and behaving in your life just spoke volumes to me, because I was not a happy camper when I got here. And you told me to get a big book. And so I promptly, when I left the meeting that day, I went to the back of the room and I picked up a big book and the 12 and 12, and anything else laying around there untethered, I put in a box and took it home. So actually, when I did my fifth step with my sponsor, she said, you stole all that stuff. So it went on my amends list and I paid for it. And, you know, but we don't know what we don't know really until we do. But you taught me what to do. And because of well-meaning people, I love the language of the heart, where the heart speaks and the heart listens, where you tell me things that you have done and experiences you have had as a direct result of working this beautiful program with a qualified sponsor has revolutionized your way of life and your thinking. Now, that was all foreign information to me. I didn't even know what the heck you were talking about until I began to have that experience myself. So I came in and I was told to keep coming back and don't drink between meetings, get a big book. Polly says in order to be a member in good standing, you got to have a sobriety date, a sponsor, a home group, and I think there's one more thing anyway. I can't remember what it is right now. But so I did those things. You know, I didn't get a sponsor because I thought that was something you really had to think a lot about. So I didn't jump right into that. I thought I needed to really kind of interview people for a while and see who they were and what they had and how they did this thing. And that really just didn't work, because I didn't get one, because I didn't see anybody that, you know, had what I wanted yet. You know, I'm always looking on the outside for what people had. But I, you know, in little incremental ways, I could see the recovery with you. I could see the language of the heart working in your life, but I couldn't see it in me. So I was always comparing my inside to your outside, and I always seemed to come up short on that. But anyway, I just kept coming back, and it was really very interesting to me that I could walk into the rooms one day, step across that threshold into Alcoholics Anonymous, and never pick up another drink. And I've not found it necessary to pick up another drink since the day I got here. And that is a bloody miracle, because I couldn't quit before. Nothing I did. And if you're trying to control your drinking, you're already out of control, is what I was taught. And so I kept coming back, and I just, I tried to do what you told me to do. I just wasn't in any big hurry to do a whole lot. I was kind of, you know, a hot mess when I walked in here. But I didn't want you to know that. I wanted you to think that I had my whole thing together here, and I was falling apart every single second, having a nervous breakdown. And I'm not drinking, and I'm starting to unravel. I'm starting to feel restless, irritable, and discontent here. And I don't know what the heck's happening, but there's something in the rooms that keeps me coming back. You know, another day that's God working through people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to help the sick and suffering alcoholic. And I was that sick and suffering alcoholic. I couldn't put words on all that until now. And it's been a few decades. And I look back and I'm so amazed at the miracle. I think as Chuck C talks about that we're in the business of miracles here. This is it's outrageous, it's extraordinary, it's unbelievable, and you can't even explain this stuff to people. But what it is, it's not educational, it's experiential. So I kept coming back on a day-to-day basis. I kept coming to meetings every day. And, and I just tried to do what you were doing. I didn't really want to talk, so that was okay with me. So I showed up, and after about 2.5 months, a friend of mine came up to me and she picked up the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. She held it up like this. She said, Vivian, it doesn't say anything in here. And this is my story. And I'm going to tell you that everything starts with alcohol and finishes with alcohol with me. I'm a real alcoholic because when I want to quit, I can't stop. And when I'm stopped, I can't stay quit. And that identifies me as a real alcoholic. I have no doubt about that. But she said, this book doesn't say anything in here about marijuana. I went, holy, let's go. So if that's a free ride, I'm in. So after about 3 months of sitting in here with untreated alcoholism and not really doing what you asked me to do, I went on out the door with this woman who's never made it back here. And for 2.5 years, I continued to do that. I didn't drink. I thought that's all you needed to do here. And so what happened was, I'm coming to meetings. I'm picking up a chip at the end of the year. Year 1, I pick up a 1-year chip. Year 2, I'm picking up a 2-year chip. And people, some of these old timers are the nails and the mortar that hold us together. And this old timer came up to me and he said, Vivian, he said, kid, if you're not clean, you're not sober. And if you're not sober, you're lying to us if you're picking up chips saying you're sober when you're really not. And that it just went to the heart of me. And I hit my knees, not drinking in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at 2.5 years. Because until I could get honest, I couldn't have this thing because I wasn't doing the work. I really wasn't sure. I really was just showing up, an empty shell, restless, irritable, and discontent. I had to do something, take the edge off. My sponsor, Michael, at the time said, Vivian, you probably needed every day you had of that just to get through life. And she was right, because I have to have something to medicate my way through life. So I stood up in front of that home group when it was time to pick up my 3rd year chip. And I told them that I had been dishonest with my home group and that I'd lied to them, that I had been using that whole time, and that I wanted to change my sobriety date so I've been here since 91. I haven't had a drink since 91, but I wasn't honest and I wasn't clean. So therefore I wasn't sober. Changed my date. And I swear to you, that's when my recovery started. That's when I felt a significant shift in how I felt when I got rigorously honest. And then it was like God could just ease in and take over one little increment at a time, one day at a time. I kept coming back, and there was a man in the rooms that was coming down from Boston, and he became known as the 4-step guru. And I'd been listening to him for a couple of years, and I said, oh my God, if I've got to hear this old codger say anything more about that 4-step, I think I'm going to scream. And after I got honest and changed my sobriety date, picked up a white chip and started in 94 as my new sobriety date, things started happening faster than I could understand. And I went to get up and get a cup of coffee during a meeting, and I literally ran into Dick, literally. And I spilled coffee on his shirt, and I went to say, I'm really sorry. And that would have been it. But no, Out of my mouth came something I hadn't planned. It did not come from me. I said, Dick, will you take me through the fourth step? And I really got, oh my God, who just said that? And why did I say that? Because I hadn't planned to say that. Believe me, that was not in my repertoire that day. It was beyond me and it was out of me. And it was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And that Dick had been looking at me, watching me. And he said, right after this meeting, young lady, we're going to go up to that church pew up here at our clubhouse. And we're going to kneel down and say the third step prayer. We're going to get busy and you're going to start today. And I just didn't have another plan. So I did that. And Dick told me, you're going to go home and you're going to start on your fourth step today. And what you're going to do is say the third step prayer. He said that third step prayer is very important in our work here. And he says, I want you to learn that prayer. And I want you to say it every morning, every night, but especially when you get busy to work on your fourth step. And you're not going to call and ask me questions because I'm not interested in your drama, your trauma, or your tragedies. We all have it. I want to hear only one question. What do I do next? And so we got busy. And I would call him every morning for my next little set of instructions. He said, you're say the third step prayer and ask God to reveal to you what names need to be on this list. I don't expect you to be able to do that with that muck of a brain you got left. I kind of took that as a little insult. So he went on my list. And that's how we do it here. We got to be willing to tell you the truth to hurt your precious little feelings. It just might save your life. And Dick said to me, I want you to go to God and see what God will do for you on this list. I don't expect you to come up with the things that you need to know. Let's let God do his business and you get out of the business of being God. And okay. So I said that third step prayer and I got down, I sat down with my glass of tea and my tablet and my pencil and I said that prayer and I said, God, please reveal to me everything that needs to be on this list. And sure enough, things started coming up like crazy. I couldn't write fast enough. And within 10 or 15 minutes, I swear to you, I had over 100 names on my list of people I hadn't thought about since the first grade. So obviously it's my alcoholism and my alcoholic thinking started long before I picked up the first drink because I had resentments all the way back to the first grade. I picked up the phone to call Dick and say, you're not going to believe what just happened. I can't even believe this. This is unbelievable. I said that prayer and I got still and quiet like you told me to do. And these names started just falling out. And he said, kid, I have 1,500 names on my list. And I went, thank God I'm not as sick as you are. And he laughed, I laughed, and he said, now I want you to write down what they did to hurt you, harm you in some way. And I don't want any, this is not psychoanalysis. I don't want any of that crap on here. I want you to write down what they did. Bullet points, one or no more than 2 sentences. I did that day, called him back. He said, now you're going to write down what it affected. But before you get into the affects my part, you're going to go to the dictionary and look all them words up and you're going to write the definitions down because how can you apply anything like that if you don't really know what the meaning is? And he was right. I didn't know what the meaning of those words. I'd heard them most all my life. So I got busy and did that and called him back and I did exactly what he told me to do. Every day I would call and I'd ask, what do we do next? You see, I was willing to do what only the dying will do here. And so I did that. And he said, now we're going to get to the best part of all this. The fourth column, the dreaded fourth column. So I got in there. He told me precisely how to do that. I went to God with that and God revealed to me. And the first person on my list was God. I was so angry with God for allowing so many terrible, tragic things happen in my life. I blame God for all of that, especially when I was a little girl and I was victimized by, sexually molested when I was 9 years old by a man that should never have been allowed to do that. And I was too afraid to tell anybody, and I lived with that. And yes, I was victimized, but I am not a victim today. That man went on to kill himself. And that's probably what he had to do to live with himself. And there were other things similar to that. They all went on my list. And so therefore, I went through the whole list, asking God to show me what my part was in every situation. And no, I didn't really have a part in that particular part. And yes, I was angry with God for allowing that to happen. And Michael said to me, Vivian, God is good and good is God. If it's not good, it's not of God, it's of man's world. And something shifted and changed in me. And I get chills every time I say this, because my whole concept about God changed that moment when she said that. It's the most beautiful thing I ever heard. And that's how we roll today. And so I look out at the problems we cause one another, or problems that I caused others. And, I've been victimized, and I'm not a victim today. How does that happen? Well, because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been able to be set free from the bondage of self. And I carry that message. And I'll get more into that later on. But I was tell you a little bit about my story is that I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, to a single mom who had 3 children by 3 different dads. Didn't know all that, didn't care. That didn't really matter when I was a little kid. And I've only recently, they have all these ancestor things now. You can go check out who's what, where, and when. And I don't even know who my daddy is anymore. Well, my mother must have been pretty busy, but somebody obviously was my daddy. So here I am. And it doesn't affect me today. It's like, I'm good. I'm just good. And it was a struggle. My mother had to work to support us. And I was very sickly as a kid. I was in and out of the hospital for the first 9 years of my life. Mostly in. I had the last rites 3 times before the age of 9. I was trying to do a little dying there, but it wasn't in the cards. God had another plan. The last time I was getting the last rites in the hospital, I came to, and my whole family was around the bed, and they were holding hands, and they were saying what we always say at the end of our meetings, the Lord's Prayer. I came to for that. I'll never forget it. I can see it just as visually today as I can see all of y'all sitting here. And I went home and I began to heal and have a life, not exactly like most normal kids, because I had some deformities in my stomach and such that caused a lot of physical problems. But over time, I got better. And I was able to go back to school, and I was able to suit up and show up and do some kid things. But I had some struggles, and today I'm good. Today I'm good. And went on through school, and I met this guy that was considerably older than me. And I think my mother was anxious for me to get married and get out of the house. They're trying to cull the herd, I believe. And I ended up marrying this guy right out of high school. And he treated me like a princess. I mean, there wasn't anything I could have wanted or ever needed. And you would have thought it would have been the ideal situation, but there's something spewing in me that I can't explain or understand. You see, I'm starting to have that restless, irritable, and discontent. And when I take a drink, I feel better. And on the weekends, I can't wait till we can do that again. And we go out and we have dinner and we go out dancing. And my husband begins to say things like, Vivian, if you just wouldn't drink so much, you'd be okay. And I don't remember that because I'm a blackout drinker. I think I'm not drinking any more than anybody else. You see, we live in that delusion that we are like others and we're not. I'm bodily and mentally different. I have that peculiar mental twist. I'm maladjusted to life. And none of those things do I actually believe about myself until I look at that 4th column in my inventory. And then I get to see the truth about who and what I'm all about. I went on in that marriage as long as I could. And finally, after a couple years, I had this beautiful son. And I thought, this is going to fix everything and it's going to get better here. And I'm having a nervous breakdown every 2 minutes because I don't know what to do with this baby. And thank God my mother didn't live too far from me and was very beneficial in helping me to raise this little boy. And and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know I have a problem. And so I continue to adjust my life to accommodate my drinking. And before you know it, I'm starting to sacrifice some of my dreams and my ability to be a mom and a parent and my ability to be a wife and my ability to have values and goals. And, I'm really looking forward to that constant relief we get from the alcohol and what have you. And so I'm looking forward to that more than I am to the day. And I'm still not into full-blown alcoholism yet, but I'm getting there. It takes what it takes. And I know that, in the beginning, it was fun and partying and frolic and very few problems. And then it began to be a few problems later on. And then before you know it, the only thing alcohol did for me was cause more problems, but I didn't care anymore. I had that cold-hearted, cold-blooded attitude about life in general. And those about me, I just didn't really care anymore because I just chased the alcohol because that was my relief. You see, the fear will always make me retreat to the familiar, even if it's painful and completely destructive. And I went on out there doing those kinds of things that we hear about in here. And I eventually would end up in that compromising, demoralizing, and compromising situations that I should have never been in with people I shouldn't have been with. I'm supposed to be a married woman. I'm supposed to be a mom. And here, comes along baby number 2. And so I think that's going to cure everything because now I've got this little girl and I just think the sun rises and sets in this little gal and I'm going to be able to suit up and show up and be the parent they deserve to have. And before you know it, I can't do it anymore. And something happens at some point in my sobriety where I just can't deal with it anymore. And when my little daughter was 7 and 8 years old. My son was 10, 11, somewhere in there. I made a decision. I can't do this. I cannot be here. And you see, we hear about those geographics that we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, and with no more thought, with no more planning than anything I had within any strength I had whatsoever, I made a decision to walk out of that house and leave those 2 babies with my husband, who was far more equipped to handle being a parent than I could be. That's the only thing I knew. And I went on out there to pursue drinking the way I wanted to drink with people that drank like I drank. And when that started to happen, I ended up in psych wards. I ended up with a divorce. I ended up with suicide attempts. I ended up in sanitariums. These are the gifts we get from full-blown alcoholism that we can't see coming. And that's why I say the chains of alcoholism are too soft to be felt, so they're too strong to be broken. And then eventually, the love of my children was not enough. The love of my husband was not enough. My whole family was not enough. There was nothing that was ever enough for me. And the only thing that ever seemed to be enough to fill that gaping, dark, broken hole was alcohol and what it did for me. And I continued to do that. And every once in a rare day, I might show up. I wanted to show up for those kids. I wanted to be the parent they deserve to have. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't show up. Christmas would come, I'd go to the mall to get them Christmas presents and would actually get some shopping and stop by the bar. And 2 days later, I've missed the holiday. I've missed their birthdays. And when they did see me, they would look in my face and go, Mom, what are you doing? They just were so mortified at my behavior that I was not there anymore. And they couldn't figure out, Mom, what are you doing? And I had no more answers. And I had to stop going because I couldn't do it anymore. And eventually, one of those days, I decided that it would be a good idea for me to try and go over and be a mom. So I sobered up enough to make it one day. And I went over to pick up my son and my daughter and go to the lake so that we could spend some time together. I planned it. I worked really hard. I tried really hard to make this work. And I picked up my daughter because my son had a baseball game and he couldn't go. And we went up to the lake to spend the day yet with another friend of mine who drank like I drank. And I couldn't tell you what those kids did that day. It's a miracle that they didn't drown in the lake, because neither one of us would have known about it because we were in a blackout, both of us. And that's the disease of alcoholism at its best. It takes from us everything of value. And the day that afternoon when I finally decided it was time to go home, I got in the car with my daughter, and because of the actions I took that day, an automobile accident happened and my daughter died in that car accident. And the car turned over on top of me and we both died. I remember waking up in the emergency room. And I was like in the corner of the room looking down at the operating table as these team of doctors were around trying to save my life. And I'm sitting up here and I'm actually sitting somewhere I can't describe with my daughter. And my daughter looks at me and says, Mom, you can't stay here. You got to go back. And I did not want to come back. But I was immediately right back in my body. I woke up sometime thereafter. There's a long road of recovery. You see the car turned over on top of me and everything from the waist up was crushed and broken. Nothing but a miracle could have made me live through that. It took about a year of recovery. I was brought up on manslaughter charges and very well should have been. I had to face all that. And I want to tell you that I drank with a vengeance from 1979 to January 3rd, 1991. I never drew a sober breath, and I drank to die. I didn't want to feel nothing. I didn't want to see nothing. I didn't want to be nothing because I felt like nothing. And all I wanted to do was die. And I drank to die. So you see, God had another whole plan here. I finished my 5th step with Dick Jones. And he got cancer and he died pretty quickly. So I had the opportunity to start looking for another sponsor. And this woman was put in my life and her name is Michael. That woman saved my life. She showed up at a conference in Hilton Head and I was her hostess. And I didn't do any. Nobody told me what I was supposed to do. You guys don't know what you're doing if you don't tell newcomers what they ought to do step by step, minute by minute. We need to be informed here. So I didn't know. I didn't do anything. So Michael meets me at the door and I said, "Good morning. I'm your hostess." She said, "Well, I haven't seen you or even talked to you." I said, "I know. Well, nobody told me what to do here." And we sat down because we had some time and we talked for a few minutes. And she says, "Do you have a sponsor?" I don't know how y'all are so smart that you just know these things, And so I said, "No, but I'm thinking about it." You don't ever want to tell an old timer that. Don't ever tell them you're thinking. It's not going to go well if you do. So anyway, she gave me about 6 cards and said, "Call me." And she had just moved from California to Augusta, Georgia. And couple weeks went by and it just became like a gnawing ember in my head that I needed to call her. And I said, she's not going to sponsor me. She lives so far away, blah, blah, blah. I kept coming up with excuses, and I finally called her. And I said, I've got my 5th step. I just haven't done it with anybody yet. My former sponsor, Dick, is got cancer, and he couldn't do it anymore with me. And she said, well, bring it up here. So I got in the car and I drove up to Augusta, and it's a good 4 or 5 hours from me. And I'm going, I can't even believe I'm doing this. I get up there, and the very next day, I give her my 5th step. And that's where she told me I had God on the list, number 1, and where she told me God is good and good is God. If it's not good, it's not of God, it's of man's world. She also, the very next name on my list was my daughter, Katina Teresa, who died in that car accident with me. And I was so angry that she died. And she said, honey, your daughter died because of the actions you took that day. You caused that accident. That's why your daughter died. And I had never, ever heard that before or looked at that, or I couldn't even fathom that. And it was like the dam broke. How do you live with that? You don't. But we have a program that shows us how to be free of that. And it's the miracle of recovery in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she said, we will go to the grave and you will take a letter of amends that you will write to your daughter. And I did that. And that was like the next day. And I didn't know where the grave was because I could never bring myself to go there. I couldn't look at it. I couldn't admit it. I couldn't acknowledge it until I had to look at it. And Michael said, you'll never do any of this alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. And so we went to the grave. It took us quite a while to find it. It was a very, very hot day in the middle of the summer. And we found the grave, and I had taken some flowers. I had my 4-year chip at that point. She said, Vivian, just bury your 4-year chip here. That's more than enough. And I did that. And the beauty of it was when I began to read the letter, an amazing thing started to happen. And I felt the presence of God. After I read that letter and during the letter, a wind began to wrap around us and cool us off. And it was like over 100 degrees this day. I felt the presence of God. I felt the presence of my daughter, and I felt forgiveness as a direct result of applying a set of principles and taking that 8th step and 9th step to the grave and doing the things I was directed to do, contrary to what I wanted to do, that forever changed my life. And I'll never be the same again, thank God, because my best design would be to kill myself. God's plan is infinitely wonderful and beyond my understanding. I refer to God today as a God of my misunderstanding because I'll never understand God, nor do I have to. And when I got through with that amends, reading the amends, I sat down. And Michael had gone back to the car because air conditioning was on and it was extremely hot and she wasn't feeling very well. And so I was almost going to get in the car and leave them, but something said, no, not yet. And I went back and I sat down at the grave and I began to just sit in stillness and quiet. And my daughter would speak to me and she said, Mom, in her little 9-year-old voice, she said, Mom, you've got a life to live. And so do I. Now go on out there and live it. And it would be years. And I know today, and telling our story is what I'm doing. So it's our story that I tell you. Story of hope and recovery and of redemption. and forgiveness that would have never happened if I hadn't taken a set of actions contrary to what I believe, think, or feel that changed my life and altered my life that day beyond anything you can imagine. And a little ladybug landed on my skirt that day, and I looked down at this ladybug. I was just so shocked and afraid to move at this juncture. And she said, "Mom, that's one of my favorite little creatures." And I looked at that ladybug, and it stayed there for as long as it needed to stay there. And that year I started the Ladybug Roundup for women in recovery. And we're coming up on our 24th year this year. And it's been extraordinary. A lot of women I've met along the road who did exactly as I did, who ended up in jails and institutions as a result of their children, their babies dying in accidents with them as a result of their alcoholism. And today we don't have to live like that anymore. I am convinced that the level of comfort, that ease and comfort that I experience here is directly proportional to the effort of my daily participation in this beautiful program. It's a spiritual practice. This is a spiritual program that helps with the spiritual malady I believe we all suffer from. That's what the book tells me, and I believe what the black print on the white page in that blue book tells me. You see, I've heard it said so well. The book is the treasure map, but it is not the treasure. We have to go to God with all this. And this takes us to a God of our understanding that will relieve us from these seemingly impossible and hopeless things that we've been through in our life, that will give us a sense of ease and comfort to live by and to be able to be of maximum service to help others. You say, in my effort, in my daily participation to my spiritual practice and connecting with the God of my understanding is getting me to God and me out of me. It's an amazing program, and it's so simple. I don't know why we're complicating the heck out of this thing these days. I see people, oh, it takes a step a month. Oh, are you kidding? I think I'll blow my damn brains out if I hear that one more time. Bill and Bob did it in a day, for God's sakes. What are we thinking? Let's get her done. Remove the cancer. Stop the insanity and start doing the work here. This is a way of life. This is not something you join for fun and for frolic. This is life-changing and life-saving. It's so simple. Step 1 is the truth about the problem. Step 2 is the truth about the solution. Step 3 is the truth about what blocks us from experiencing that solution. Step 4 through 9 gets us unblocked, and steps 10 through 12 keeps us unblocked. I don't know how much more simple that needs to get. And it works for me every single time. And that's how I take people through the steps today. Quickly. I don't have time. I don't know how much time anybody's got left here. For me to say, go read the book and get back to me in a month is to give somebody a life death sentence. I don't believe that a bit. I don't believe that's how the book was meant to be. I don't believe how this program was meant to be. Somewhere along the line, we've got some rehab rhetoric that's intervened in our program here. And it's sad to watch, because why do we have 5% recovery now when we had 50 to 75% in the beginning? Because they did the work and they didn't balk about it and they didn't moan and groan about it. They just got busy, pen to paper, and their life changed. So that's what I do today. And I continue to keep doing it because it works. I can no longer let up on the spiritual program of action that we've been asked to do here. Then I need it more today than I ever knew I needed it back then. Now I know how vital it is to our recovery. So I cling to the thought that in God's hand, the dark past is our greatest possession we have. It's the key to life and happiness, and that we can share with others and hopefully avert misery and death for some. Our purpose is to show others how we have suffered and how we have recovered. And for that, I am so grateful that I can be here today sane, somewhat sane and sober, very sober, and very happy about it. So all I can say is thank you, Glenn, for letting me share. And I think I'm done.